A bright pink envelope sits alone on Alina's porch. The kind of pink that seems to flash out of place among the soft colors of spring that surround her door. It's not her birthday, not even close. In the half-chill of the morning, she reads her name printed in emboldened, slanted letters, as if shouting. Her hands tremble a bit. She's been a widow for 4 years now and rarely expects much mail, let alone something that looks this urgent. Inside, the letter is stiff, barely folding open. At the top, the HOA logo, the edges too sharp, a smile that hides teeth. She reads phrases like non-compliance, unauthorized plantings, subject to immediate removal. A code number is underlined, referencing a bylaw she's never once heard discussed at the neighborhood meetings she's faithfully attended. Her eyes scan lower, then clear as the red warning flags you sometimes spot near the community pond. Her late husband's rose garden, the one he'd planted over decades, the one she'd carefully tended after his passing, the very earth where his ashes were spread, is suddenly illegal. No warning, no previous complaint, but the penalty is strict. Her chest feels tight. The instructions are cold. Remove all unapproved landscaping features within 7 days or face further action. Like his memory doesn't count. She steps outside into the faint warmth of midday, searching for someone who might explain. She can't find a soul. Only the ripple of wind across rose petals, crimson, gold, even that rare faded lavender he'd always loved most. For the past 4 years, she's felt like these flowers kept her company. There's comfort in their order, in their stubbornness. The next morning, when the sun pries through her bedroom blinds, Alina notices something bright and new in the yard. She heads down the walkway in her slippers, heart pounding. Where soft grass should be, there's an ugly stake and a screaming neon sign. Violation. HOA action required. She stands staring, wondering if any neighbors are watching from behind their curtains. She kneels and touches the dirt near the sign. The roots beneath her fingers still hold warmth, like memory trapped just under the surface. There's no explanation for why this is happening now. No neighbor has ever complained, not in all the seasons since the garden was first planted. She feels alone, but she isn't angry, not yet. Before she can make a plan, a car slows as it passes her house. The driver stares openly at her. She wonders if they're part of it. Across the street, Mrs. Avery's curtain flickers and falls back into place. Everyone seems to know something they won't say out loud. She returns inside, grips the phone, and dials the number on the letter. The voicemail answers. "Your call is very important to us." She leaves her name, her address, and says, "Please call back," her voice calm, almost too gentle. As evening falls, the sky softens, but nothing in her chest feels settled. The sign stands sharp and bright against the dusk. Her roses, like loyal witnesses, offer nothing but color. What kind of rule could erase so many years of tending and love? Why did no one warn her? She checks the mailbox one last time that night, but it's empty. Except for the envelope, now stashed at the bottom, its bright pink edge still visible. She wonders who would come after her garden, and what do they really want? But as darkness folds over her house, one tiny, blooming question will not leave her mind. Why now when everything else in her quiet world seemed so steady? She stands at the window watching the sign shiver in the wind, wondering if tomorrow will bring any answers, or only more trouble. The wind picks up early, tossing the neon sign ever so slightly as Alina kneels among her roses. She is gathering fallen petals when her heart leaps at a new sight. At the very center of her husband's favorite bush, a perfect glance of pale pink is broken. One of her prized hybrid blooms lies snapped in half, left dangling as if in warning. She holds the limp stem. The cut is too sharp, not an accident, not weather, not a curious child. She looks over her shoulder. The street is quiet, but she can feel eyes on her. She presses her lips together, fighting the instinct to call out his name, the way she used to when she was startled. She tucks the broken bloom into her apron pocket. Her husband would have asked the neighbors, would have done something. Alina glances across the street, seeking comfort. In the window opposite, the blinds twitch. She pauses, making eye contact with a shadow behind the glass. It's Mrs. Avery again, the neighbor who always saved her the last piece of lemon pound cake at yard sales. But Mrs. Avery only stares, tight-lipped, before turning away. The blinds fall closed, cutting Alina off from even that. The day drags with a heaviness she hasn't felt since the funeral. Each time she looks at the garden, the broken flower weighs on her chest. Early afternoon, she checks her mailbox, hoping for an answer, some kind of update, but finds nothing except another bright notice. She opens it and her hands shake. The fine for non-compliance has doubled overnight. No reasoning, just another demand for action. More threats, more urgency. She phones the HOA office. Again, nothing but a recorded line. No option for a real person. She tries the extension for the president directly. It rings and rings, finally disconnecting itself. That night, shadows stretch out over her living room until she can't ignore the feeling of being watched. She jumps at every floorboard creak. Then, just as she's preparing for bed, a noise breaks the silent anxiety, a quiet metallic ping. She makes her way down the hallway to check the front door. Lying on the cool tile inside her mail slot is a single rose stem. There's no card, no note. Just the stem, stripped of every leaf but not completely denuded. A single perfect petal clings to the end. Alina stares at the stem, holding it between nervous fingers. Is this a gesture of support or is it another warning? It's impossible to tell, but she can't sleep, not really, that night. Her mind spins with what-ifs. What do they mean, leaving this when she's so alone? Quiet voices haunt the dark of her room. The next morning, the garden seems smaller somehow, or perhaps it's just that the air is sharper now. But behind the hush, somewhere between threat and hope, something is beginning to move. She walks to the window and scans the street, wondering not just who left the rose, but what might happen the next time she opens her door. The fine, the sign, the snapped bloom, the silent neighbor. The pattern is starting to feel more personal and nowhere near finished. Days gather like clouds. Alina's mailbox is now a source of dread. Each new letter is heavier than the last, even if the envelope feels impossibly thin. She sits at her kitchen table, surrounded by neatly folded newsletters, the kind the HOA used to send once a season, news about block parties and pet costume contests and water restrictions in summer. She flips through them, hunting for anything to explain the sudden shift. But the rules cited in her warning, nowhere to be found. Her hands lead her to the HOA's website late at night, but the page is newly updated. Fresh bylaws posted there, entire paragraphs she doesn't recall ever being discussed or voted on. The date stamp only 2 weeks back. The anger flares hot, sudden, and unfamiliar. Did no one else see this slip in? Next morning, she musters her courage and drives to the HOA office, which sits inside what was once a cheerful model home, now stripped of charm by the addition of dull gray shutters and a heavy brass lock. The receptionist, with a pleasant tone that freezes just behind her eyes, tells Alina, "Those records aren't available to residents. You'll have to submit a written request." There's no form to take home, no clipboard to sign. A familiar face appears at the end of one shelf. Tom Keller, a board member who once attended her husband's wake. Their grocery store small talk used to be sincere, but today, Tom averts his eyes, pretending not to see her as he fumbles with a stack of binders. Alina's voice catches in her throat. She steps outside, sunlight glaring. Her phone buzzes, a text from an old friend, Linda, who lives 2 streets over. It's quick, like she's afraid of being seen. They did the same thing to the couple on Sycamore Lane back in April. Nip it fast. A message, half warning, half confession. Alina's resolve thickens. They think they can cow her with legalese and new rules no one remembers agreeing on. But she's certain she's not the first. The string of polite smiles on the HOA board, the glances that slip past her. There's a pattern there. She spends the afternoon cataloging everything, snapping photos of her garden, gathering old newsletters as evidence. She traces timelines, searching for meaning others might miss. But as dusk falls, her hope dims. When she walks the grocery store aisles later, Tom is there again. This time he turns sharply away. She wonders if he's ashamed or just hiding something deeper. What else has the board been doing in secret? Who else is watching? And will anyone stand beside her if she decides to fight back instead of bend? Alina tucks her list of questions into her handbag, the paper crackling, loud as thunder on an otherwise silent night. The scent of fresh-baked sugar wafts through Alina's house the next afternoon. At her front door, there's old comfort. A neighbor's smile, homemade cookies stacked in a tin, warm to the touch. Helen stands quietly in the doorway, her eyes hesitant. She asks, too casually, "Did you get that same weird letter?" Alina nods, unable to trust her own voice. Helen lets the smile fade. "Strange how these things all start happening at once," she whispers, almost afraid to say the words out loud. Alina brings the tin inside, and as she sets it down, something underneath rattles. She lifts the cookies, finds a sealed envelope with a copy of a different violation notice. Alina's name isn't on it. The format is the same. Same threatening words, same signature at the bottom, same impossible deadline. Today, the target is the old sycamore in Helen's yard, called a hazard overnight. Helen's hands shake as she pours tea. Later that day, Alina prints out an official cease and desist. She writes out citations from state code, carefully referencing every number, her wrists aching from tension. She tucks it into an envelope addressed to the HOA. She mails it with ceremony, choosing her oldest, steadiest pen. In her letter, her words are sharp. She's not asking them to listen, she's demanding. But the answering silence feels weaponized. The next afternoon, she checks her mailbox only to find a new notice, this time with daily late fees added in small, cramped type. No acknowledgement of her letter, no sign they even read it. Helen comes back as the sun dips low, picking up her empty cookie tin. "Just don't talk about this on the block group," she warns softly. "You don't know who's listening." Then she's gone, leaving Alina feeling equal parts comforted and unsettled. Alina stares at the violation notice meant for Helen, tracing the signature at the bottom. It's the same hand as hers. How many more are there? How many neighbors being bullied one quiet letter at a time? What is the HOA really after if it's not just neat lawns and clipped hedges? The cookies are sweet, but the taste of fear is sharper, and she senses something big is happening just under the surface. As night thickens outside, Alina finds herself looking not at the garden but at her neighbors' houses. Lights flicker on, blinds stutter closed. Who else received those pink slips? And who, besides Alina, will find the courage to answer? The next morning, Alina takes her coffee outside. The air smells faintly of cut grass and last night's rain. When she walks to the bulletin board near the community pool, a spot where people post about lost dogs and winter coat drives, she notices something odd. Pinned crookedly to the corkboard with a thumbtack, a single sheet of paper, it is clearly anonymous. Printed in black, heavy text, the title asks, "Should rose gardens be allowed?" Vote below. The survey has no HOA logo, no sign of approval, but space for residents to mark their answers. Already a few checkmarks scatter the bottom. She studies it for a moment, heart pounding with a sense of sick anticipation. Who is raising this question now so publicly? Before she can decide whether to add her own answer, she hears cautious footsteps on the path behind her. When she turns, no one is there. By evening, as twilight gathers, she walks past the board again, and the paper is gone. No trace of the poll or any sign it was ever posted. It disappeared just as quickly as it emerged. But back at her walkway, someone has left a mark. 3 tidy signatures, drawn in white chalk, appear near her front steps. Each name written with a slant Alina recognizes. Max, Clara, and S.R. All neighbors, all people she's shared coffee with but never secrets. She stoops to run her finger over the chalk, unsure if it's an act of support or defiance. When she looks up, she spots 5 more chalk signatures leading down her path, looping toward the curb. The air is different now, charged with something both fierce and fearful. Later that night, as she walks to the mailbox, Alina notices a strange new pattern. On houses along her street, each mailbox is marked with a tiny painted flower petal. Soft blue tucked under her own box, a fiery red on the Hamiltons across the road, a mess of colors doodled on Ms. Carson's. The marks are careful, discreet, almost a secret handshake among those in the know. It isn't just about her rose garden anymore. Someone else is organizing. Somewhere between solidarity and conspiracy, the neighbors are starting to claim their sides. Alina breathes in, shivering. If the chalk and petals are a message, what does it mean? And what might come next now that the fight is no longer hers alone? She turns her face to the dark, questions swirling. Who can she trust? And what are the petals warning her about when the next move is out of her hands? A white official-looking envelope arrives the following morning, bold text shouting, "Final notice," through its plastic window. Alina reads it twice, barely believing the words. 72 hours before forced removal by contractor. Failure to comply will result in immediate action and escalation. Below the threatening block of text, a contractor's name is printed in heavy, dark ink. Coleman Land Services. That name rings sharp and ugly for Alina. It's the president's brother-in-law, a fact she learned at an HOA meeting last winter. back when neighbors still laughed over coffee and volunteered for food drives, not witch hunts. A pitiful calm settles over her. They aren't even pretending this is about rules anymore. She dials the number for the local news, shaking as she explains. "I'm a widow and this is my husband's memorial garden and they won't stop fining me." But the reporter interrupts, apologetic. "I'm sorry, we don't cover HOA disputes." He hangs up before she can say another word. That evening, a metallic thud draws her attention. At the side of her house, the protective box around her sprinkler system is left cracked in two. The wires inside are tangled, ripped. Water pools, threatening the roses she spent years tending. Fear courses through her. It would be so easy to give up. But how can she, when memories of laughter, of announcements about garden club, jokes about crazy board rules, cling to the air? That night when she steps outside to check the damage, something strange glints in the bird bath. A small USB drive, glimmering in the moonlight, left where only she would spot it. The drive is smooth and cold in her palm. No one is out, no dogs bark, nobody calls her name. Yet clearly, someone has been watching close enough to know her habits. She returns inside, double bolts her door, her mind racing. Who would risk leaving evidence for her to find? Who knows what kind of trouble she is already in? She sits at her computer and lets her hand hover, uncertain. Is this a trap, or the proof she needs to finally understand what is really happening behind closed doors? The answers have never felt closer, but with every step, Elena can feel the danger growing. What will she discover, and at what cost? In the stillness of her dining room, with midnight shadows draped across the table, Elena slides the USB into her laptop. A plain folder pops up. It's labeled only HOA, strictly private. Her breath comes in shallow gasps as she double-clicks. Inside are dozens of emails spanning months, all subject-lined Operation Clear Lot. She opens the first. In it, a board member writes, "If she won't comply, escalate, make it painful." Another, "Push her out if she doesn't sell." Then the kicker, "Easier for Phase 2. Elena's pulse quickens. What is Phase 2? Why are they so desperate to see her gone? Why this sudden escalation after so many years of peace? Buried in the chain, one thread stands out. The HOA president writes, "As soon as the land is clear, we can finalize the deal." Attached is a scan, some kind of real estate agreement. Most of the details are blacked out except the meeting date, which matches the week she first got the violation notice. She scrolls, pausing as her eyes land on a familiar name, the same contractor listed on her removal notice. Beneath that, only acronyms and redactions. Elena sits back, heart pounding. What are they hiding with all this secrecy and sabotage? What could possibly be worth bullying her and others out of their homes, using technicalities and threats? But the attachment makes her head spin. There is another dark blur, a buyer whose name is blacked out entirely. Why would that matter if it was just a landscaping fix? She stares at the emails, still scrolling. At the bottom of one, there's a single line. "If she won't sell, we'll push her out." She closes her eyes, feeling rage, and something older, deeper, creep up through her bones. Her husband's garden, the laughter in this house, the cozy porch, all of that didn't matter to them. They want what lies beneath. Something bigger is unfurling behind these closed doors, not just rules, but a grab for land. Cold, calculated power. But as the first hints of dawn brush the sky outside, Elena wonders, not for the first time, if there is anyone she can truly trust. The more she uncovers, the more she senses an even deeper game at play, still waiting in the shadows, inviting her to pull on threads she isn't sure she can handle. She calls a friend's son who teaches computers at the local college. "Can you help me leak these? Get the story out?" she asks. He agrees, and late that evening he posts them to a popular community forum. They wait, watching as nothing happens. Her post is scrubbed, comments vanish within minutes, and a moderator's terse reply blinks. "HOA legal request, thread removed." The phone rings, shrill and sharp. No caller ID. Elena freezes. She swallows, answers. "Back off or the roses won't be the only things cut down," a voice hisses. She tries to say something, but the caller hangs up. Her hands shake too hard to even place the phone gently on the cradle. That night, fear moves through her house like smoke. She keeps the lights on. Her cat, Cleo, doesn't come when called for dinner. Elena walks from room to room, tapping the dish, calling quietly into corners until her voice cracks. When morning comes, Cleo is still gone. Days stretch out, tense with expectation. She notices new shadows moving at the corner of her vision. On the third evening, just as Alina is closing the curtains, something whirs. A black drone floats just outside her second-story window, hovering, blinking its tiny red eye. She grabs her phone to film it, but the drone darts away so swiftly it almost seems imagined. The house feels smaller, tighter every night. The HOA president no longer appears at the meetings, no longer answers messages. Her isolation is complete, the walls of the house pressed in by threat after threat. She stands at her window, clutching the blanketed silhouette of Cleo's bed, waiting for the drone to reappear, or worse, a car to pull up and someone to step out into the night. Why are they going this far? And if she pushes back one more time, what will happen to her and to everyone else marked in chalk and petals? Somewhere in the dark, the line has already been crossed. Alina just can't see yet how deep and tangled the roots have truly grown. The first rays of dawn hit her rose garden in a pale gold, and Alina sees movement outside, shadows shifting silently across her yard. She blinks, expecting just another delivery or perhaps another violation sign. But as she opens her door, the breath leaves her chest. 30 neighbors stand silently on her lawn, each holding a single flower, a rose, a daisy, even a baby's breath for those without gardens of their own. No signs, no talking, just people. She recognizes faces. Helen, Mrs. Avery, Tom from the board, Linda from 2 streets over, even shy little Max from the chalk marks. They don't speak. The power is in their silence, in the way they all gather close, shoulder to shoulder, elbows bumping but nerves steeled, showing up in a way words never could. The HOA isn't slow to respond. 2 dark-suited security guards walk up the driveway, radios clipped to their vests. Cameras attached to their hats blink in the green sunrise. The guards begin shooing people, warning about trespass. Then one flips what looks at first like a switch. Suddenly all the garden's security cameras blink and fade, shutting off at once. A drone whirs up and down the block, but this time it clips a tree branch and tumbles onto the road, spinning out in a mess of wires. A commotion breaks the hush. A protester is grabbed gently by security and hustled away in a golf cart, the ride quick and oddly quiet. People murmur, but no one breaks the line. Eyes stay focused on Alina's house, on the roses. Somewhere in the crowd, a phone is lifted. Someone records the entire confrontation. Hours later, the video surfaces online. The uploader's screen name sparks recognition. It's her late husband's niece, who moved away after their last big family dust-up. The air buzzes with a new kind of danger. The crowd disperses, not in defeat but in purpose, each person pausing to lay their flower on Alina's steps. As the last petals touch the ground, Alina wonders. Who else has been watching the HOA in secret? And what did her niece mean, tagging the video with that strange phrase? The past will always bloom again? All that's certain is this isn't over, and that now, finally, everyone is watching. The video makes waves online, but its real sparks ignite in private messages. By the next morning, Alina's late husband's niece, Molly, is at her kitchen table. She looks older than Alina remembers, grief in her eyes, but also a hardened resolve. Molly's voice shakes only once as she lays out what she knows. She explains the reason she left town all those years ago. It was the president. He swept that whole embezzlement thing under the rug right before he first ran. Took 50 grand in beautification funds, then threatened anyone who found out. Alina listens, numb. Your uncle, Molly says quietly, started asking questions. They warned him too. But Molly has no paper proof, just old phone records and vague memories. She tried to file a complaint back then, but the board stalled, losing her paperwork again and again. It's all hearsay unless we find the original docs, Molly sighs. Alina combs through her attic, hoping the dust will yield answers. The old lockbox is heavy in her hands. She remembers keeping board minutes, clippings, letters, anything vaguely official. Her fingers fumble with the key, but it jams, unable to turn. Did someone change the lock, or is she just losing strength after all this time? She sits back, shoulders slumped, surrounded by the stuff of 2 lifetimes. Molly paces, phone in hand, already planning next steps. Freedom of information requests, calls to old block captains, online tips to local journalists. But nothing comes easy. Even as hope flickers, the question gnaws at Alina. If these efforts are what finally bring down the president, what else might spill into the light? About her husband's last months, about those all-too-convenient new HOA rules. As Molly's ringtone breaks the attic silence. A call from someone on the inside, someone who knows more. The tension is unbearable. Would the lockbox give them proof or just another dead end? And how much risk are they willing to take when the cost could be greater than either ever imagined? In the nights that follow, Alina barely sleeps. Her world fills not just with memories but with symbols. A silent rebellion spreads through the neighborhood. Dozens of petals bloom in secret, painted beneath mailboxes all along the block. Husbands mow cryptic words, justice, hope, into their lawns, bright stripes glinting in the morning sun. Neighbors hush when HOA board members drive past. The monthly newsletter skips an issue for the first time in years. Rumor says the publisher quit, refusing to run another president's column. A young filmmaker appears, knocking on Alina's door. "This is history," she insists. She asks careful questions, films the wind that stirs the rose petals, the faded chalk names, the trembling hands as neighbors carry their flowers. Then, just after sunset, news spreads. The neighborhood's private security firm has terminated their contract with the HOA. No reason given. Next, a resignation letter leaks onto community pages, a board member citing irreconcilable ethical concerns. Residents post relief, but also fear. Even the quietest winds carry change. Alina notices the old wind chime, her grandmother's. It stirs as people pass by, playing a tune just slightly off from the melody she learned as a child. Someone, she realizes, slipped in during the night and changed a bell, taking part in the protest in a way only she would notice. Yet with every show of support, the silence from the HOA leadership deepens. Meeting minutes are skipped. No explanation, no president, just anxious footfalls of those with open secrets. But still, the missing proof, the concrete connection, remains locked away. Alina knows the story needs more than painted petals. It needs the kind of evidence that cannot be erased or respun. And as wind rattles her window, she asks herself, what will it take to finally break the power holding this community tight? And what price will she pay for being the one to see it done? The proof comes to her in the middle of the afternoon, unexpected, like most meaningful things. Molly races up the drive, face flushed with victory. She brandishes a fat, battered manila envelope. Inside, tucked between faded papers, the final missing file. Alina lays it all out on her dining table, each sheet more damning than the last. There are expense reports showing thousands paid out to shell companies, all attributed to land beautification. Every line item is signed by the HOA president. One payment jumps out with icy clarity, a check to a landscaping company registered to the president's cousin, a man recently convicted for fraud in another state. Alina's hands shake, but she keeps reading. The final payout listed is the one that freezes her blood, issued the week before her husband's death, coded as Memorial Lot Ground Prep, complete clearance. The president's tidy signature arches calmly across the line. Light fades from the room as the gravity sets in. This was never about roses. It was about a land deal, one that required families to be pushed out, gardens erased, and silence bought. Alina can feel something inside her tightening, the last breath before a storm. The file is alive in her hands, its truth too heavy to ignore. She prints extra copies, sends digital scans to local activists, lawyers, every former resident she can remember. Within the hour, the documents begin to circulate, links spreading faster than the board can possibly contain. But as her inbox overflows with messages, some grateful, some frightened, Alina knows the true cost is still coming. She looks up at the fading sunlight. If the payout ended the week before her husband died, what else was buried with him? What secrets and what lines will finally break open on the day of reckoning? As night deepens, she senses the quiet before the storm. Every neighbor waits, breath held, for the showdown that years of fear and compliance have been building toward. Election day arrives on a current of tension thick enough to taste. People line the sidewalks. Everywhere the sharp scent of roses mixes with the breath of summer. Neighbors clutch blooms, pin petals to lapels, even wear red silk scarves knotted around their necks as symbols. Alina wakes before dawn, the lockbox and envelope resting beside her coffee. She dresses carefully, pinning one of her husband's last hybrid blooms to her chest. The house is silent, but every step feels purposeful. The rec center buzzes with record turnout. People mill in knots of conversation, eyes darting toward the table where the president used to sit. Only the chair is empty. Ballots slip quietly into boxes. For once, whispers travel up and down the corridors, rumors of evidence and arrests. In the last hour, a neighbor stands and, with shaky voice, nominates a leaner from the floor. The room hushes, then the applause builds louder and more urgent, rolling like thunder as more names are shouted forward. Reporters cluster along the walls. Linda, Helen, Molly, all present, all standing tall. Moments before the vote count closes, someone marches in. A courier, legal notice in hand, charges of fraud and conspiracy, signatures crisp and clear, directed at the outgoing president and his cronies. When the new board is announced, the cheering nearly lifts the paint from the walls. Alina feels Molly's hand in hers, the victory trembling with relief, pain, and a readiness to begin. But in the very last row, a man sits, not standing, not clapping. A tie pin shaped like pruning shears glints on his chest. His face gives away nothing. Alina's eyes meet his, and for one breath, the room is cold. The cycle isn't truly finished. There are more secrets, more roots beneath the surface. As cameras flash and neighbors hug, the tie pin catches the light. A silent warning that justice will always have its rivals, and that for every ending, somewhere the next fight is just beginning.